Is there anyone more popular in WWE right now than The Fiend? Probably not. Someone who has managed to captivate the audience by staying the course and offering a new twist on the usual proceedings, Bray Wyatt may have finally found his calling. If the powers that be treat him right this time, there's no reason why he can't go on to have a career like The Undertaker. We need those spooky characters in wrestling, even though it never makes sense when you can shoot lightning out your hands, but you don't use it in a match. Given this love though, let's go through the information that's out there and learn a bit more about this persona and how it could play out as the clock ticks on. I'm Simon from What Culture. Remember to subscribe. This is 10 things you didn't know about The Fiend. Number 10, it was born with Axel Mulligan. Who is Axel Mulligan, you ask? It sounds like a character from an awful video game, but it is actually the first time Bray Wyatt donned a mask. Asking you to go back to his FCW days, Bray would roam around as this person who looked a bit like Michael Myers had had sex with somebody from Slipknot and then given birth to this. It was clearly horror inspired as Wyatt wore American Nightmare t-shirts, somebody tell Cody Rhodes, and he even used the stunner as his finisher. That's why you may have noticed some of Bray's tweets to one Stone Cold Steve Austin tip around such facts. He knows exactly what he's doing. It didn't last long before Wyatt decided to try something else, which was of course his cult leader gimmick, and that in itself was totally different from his Husky Harris character that he'd also tried out for a while. I'm sure they all influenced what the Fiend would become, but the teen slasher look was the biggest of all. They were pretty much cut from the same cloth, and yes, that was a pun. Number 9, Bray shut himself off from close friends. When Braun Strowman appeared on Sam Roberts' podcast in 2019, he had some things to say about his friend Bray Wyatt, namely that when he was creating The Fiend, he vanished off the face of the planet. Much like Heath Ledger had done when perfecting his Joker performance, Wyatt decided to turn off the world in order to get in the right headspace before working on his latest creation, and that included just going silent on his mates. It left them all baffled, as it would do, and even when the Firefly Funhouse aired, it was perplexing to wrestlers backstage. Braun described his first experience of it as weird and thought his buddy had gone crazy. After a few episodes though, the monster among men's opinion had vastly changed and he realised that Wyatt was a genius. That's quite the shift. Still, for Bray to go to such lengths in order to work out the kinks is probably why it's going so well. It's not hot shot or booked on a whim. There's a plan and a concept that goes far deeper than week-to-week television. Only all new gimmicks were allowed to go through such a process. Number 8, Code Orange secretly made his entrance music. A little note about metal band Code Orange. They were the backing group for Incendiary's Brendan Garone at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn 3. They helped him perform Aleister Black's Root of All Evil theme live, and it was all just great. It was off the back of this performance that Wyatt followed them on Twitter. I assume they followed him back, and then a few years later a conversation blossomed. Specifically, Code Orange drummer and vocalist Jamie Morgan reached out and said he'd love to do something together. That switched on Bray's brain, and after some back and forth, it was decided the Pittsburgh natives would be the people to jazz up Wyatt's theme and make it fit the Fiend character. Morgan even told Newsweek that there are a bunch of test recordings, presumably in some vault today, and they had to watch some of the Firefly Funhouse promos to get a good idea of where to take this. The result is a theme everybody seems to love. Twitter, ladies and gentlemen, the be-all and end-all of life. Number 7, Wyatt wasn't happy with the early ideas. Nobody wants to be told their idea sucks. You put your heart and soul into something, present it to the relevant parties, and if they turn around and go, nah fam, you're not going to be happy. This was Jason Baker from Tom Savini Studios when he first showed Bray Wyatt his concept art for The Fiend. Speaking to GameSpot, Baker straight up admitted that the Eater of Worlds didn't like what he saw, and it meant reaching out to sketch artist Carl Scarborough to help get everything to where it needed to be. Thankfully, that was far more successful, and Wyatt was involved with the process from start to finish. A major thing Baker and his friends did was continually tweak the mask that was the original design. The real light bulb moment was that this wasn't a monster prop for a movie and had to work in the crazy world of wrestling, and once that was made apparent, it all seemed to come together to what we have right now. I think it's only fair to say they did a good job. The Fiend mask is terrifying. Number 6, the Fiend mask had to be modified. And speaking of that, the real problem was making sure Wyatt could use it when he wrestled. In the same interview with GameSpot, Baker summed it up when he said, if the guy's going to wear this while beating the living piss out of people, he should be able to see out of it and make sure that it's strapped to his head. Exactly. If it was just going to fall off and make Bray look stupid, then the whole gimmick would be dead the minute he stepped in the ring. Be like Kane's mask falling off and finding out he wasn't burned at all. Oh wait, we did that. To sort this out, a number of small holes were poked into it so he was able to breathe, as well as tweaking the colours so it was closer to a human being's actual flesh. The idea was to make it look like the mask was part of his face, and not some crap Halloween costume. You're still going to have less peripheral vision when you don anything onto your face, which is why Rey Mysterio deserves all the credit in the world, but still. The Fiend's mask was shifted around as much as it could to serve someone whose job is jumping around a ring. They really did think about everything. Number 5, Huskus the Big Boy is Husky Harris. Every character in the Firefly Funhouse has some serious history behind it, but Huskus the Big Boy can be seriously analysed when you jump behind the scenes. Abigail the Witch and Ramblin' Rabbit are clearly winks and nods to his cult leader days, but Huskus goes a step further and gets personal. Why? Slap your head. Because it's just a toy version of Wyatt's NXT character known as Husky Harris. When that guy debuted in WWE in 2010, he was described as being a Sherman tank with a Ferrari engine. Phrase got overused, as is always the way, and this is why when Bray talks about his struggles, he actively tells the pig that he needs to take better care of himself, otherwise he'll get slandered by his peers. In short, it's a window into Wyatt's battle with excessiveness and gluttony, and it hints that he may have even been called Huskus the Pig Boy as a bad-mannered joke back in the day. The fact Bray is willing to do this is just yet more evidence as to why all of this works. Can dive into the content like it's a swimming pool. Number 4, the Muscle Man dance had ridiculous depth. And continuing on from that thought is the Muscle Man dance. Coming to the Funhouse on the 3rd of June 2019 Raw, it just seemed absolutely ridiculous, but also brilliant. On it, we saw Bray wear gym shorts while doing a bunch of exercises, how he jived away with his puppets, and Vince McMahon even got involved. It was proper fever dream stuff, and for many it was just a way to get people talking, which it did. In actuality, there was far more to it than that. The fact that Vinnie Mac was included to begin with is proof. For years, wrestling fans have heard that McMahon is obsessed with physical excellence and jacked dudes, which is why he leaned on them so heavily as WWE became a powerhouse in the 80s. Nothing else, Vince also loves going to the gym. He is a fanatic. No one has ever really said that of Bray himself though, which could have been the idea here, as was the music too. Not a million miles away from McMahon's stand back performance from the 1987 Slammy Awards. Make sure you go on YouTube right now if you haven't seen it. But all that does make it seem as if this entire skit was a send-up of McMahon's love of bodybuilding. I mean, how out of nowhere is that? You've got to love it. Number 3, the story of the lantern. Remember when, on an episode of the Firefly Funhouse, Bray chainsawed the head of a cardboard cutout of his old character? Just seemed like a crazy thing to do, right? Not quite. It all tied into the fact he came out at SummerSlam to face Finn Balor holding a gruesome new lantern that was also the old head of Bray Wyatt. Another design dreamt up by Savini Studios, there was some worry if WWE would actually go ahead with this. If you check out the early concept art shared by Carl Scarborough on Twitter, the sketch was modified to have sewn-up eyes, meaning light couldn't shine out of them, and a more realistic head of hair. As it was, the end product was so frightening that Jason Baker and his team thought WWE would think this was way too much. As it turned out, they did not. WWE loved it and agreed to let Wyatt carry it with him to the ring on the pay-per-view for his first match back. It was both a surprise and a piece of joy for Baker, who had convinced himself the PG company would have to veto it. Good thing they didn't, because that got as much chatter after the fact as anything else on the show. Number 2, his 8 secret messages. Remember all those seemingly empty threats and lines Bray would throw out there in promos between 2015 and 2017 during feuds with Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, Randy Orton and more? Well, they all meant something as part of a broader story, and they were sneakily hidden amongst all the other mumbo-jumbo we didn't understand. So yes, they were telling the tale of The Fiend years before that was even a thing. Wyatt posted each one on Twitter in May 2019, and in order they gave the message, "What makes you smile? I know you're listening. Let me in. We don't belong here. What happened to you was such a tragedy. Limbo is no place for a soul like yours. I believe I found the answer. The angel with burnt wings is waving you on home." Not so coincidentally, those all became the titles for each episode of the Firefly Funhouse, and every edition was thematically linked to just one line. That is just ridiculous storytelling right there. Hiding secret messages in promos 4 years before you'd ever use them. And yeah, maybe this was done retroactively, but who cares? Still really cool. Number 1, why the Fiend covers his ears. You know that horrible noise that plays when the Fiend is about to turn up? It's not just there to add to the horror, although it does. It's also a reference to something Bray did in 2015 that most fans wouldn't have witnessed unless they were watching Superstar Ghost Stories that aired on WWE's YouTube channel. In this, Wyatt introduced us to the Man in the Woods, otherwise known as the Fiend. During this video, Bray said he was out hunting rabbits and heard a noise so loud he had to cover his ears so they wouldn't bleed. He then clasped the side of his head like the Fiend does now and revealed that this man in the woods had no pigment in his skin, was pale as pearl, and had thin yellow hairs running all the way down to his knees. So yeah, once again he was describing the character years before it was even a thing. This is just crazy now, and that's why Wyatt's Fiend covers his ears. The brain rattling noise in his head won't go away as he's tortured between the thought of hurting and healing. What's more, Bray laid the foundations for everything from backstory to appearance in 2015. 2015! Most characters get made on a Sunday and on TV 24 hours later. Bray Wyatt is a different beast. Know anything else that we don't know about the Fiend? Make sure you let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Then head to whatculture.com and read yourself some articles, and follow What Culture on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. My name is Simon from What Culture, and I will talk to you again soon.